Hello students and staff at St Mary's Primary School. It's Father Michael down at the church. I just wanted to send a message of support to you now that you've gone back to remote learning, and to your parents too. Some of you, it's a real challenge, teachers, parents and children too. For some, you're quite comfortable in that way of learning, but for some it's a real challenge. These are trying times with many challenges. One challenge I face is the closing of our churches again. When I close the church tonight, we have to remain closed until further notice, so that'll be for several weeks. So many of us are receiving that as news, bad news, makes us feel sad. But there's a message that I take which consoles me from last Sunday's Mass. And it's from St Paul in the second reading. He said, "These are the trials through which we triumph by the power of him who loved us." St Paul knew his challenges. He knew many trials and tribulations, from being imprisoned, being shipwrecked, being tortured, being persecuted, because he preached and taught in the name of Jesus. And he gives us that great message of hope, that these are the trials through which we triumph by the power of him who loved us. So when we feel powerless in this time of pandemic, in this time of there being bad news with death and disease and unemployment and financial pressures, all sorts of pressures, we turn to Jesus, who gives us that grace, who gives us his strength, his power, as an expression of his love for us. So in our powerlessness, the power of God, the grace of God is at its most prevalent, its most prolific, its most powerful. It's, as he says in his letter to the Corinthians, having heard it in prayer from the Lord himself, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." So in our weaknesses, in our vulnerabilities, in our challenges, with our trials and tribulations, it is God's power that is made manifest. It comes into its own and gives us a strength which is beyond our own power. So that's the great Christian paradox that we learn through the life, death and resurrection of Jesus. And it is truly a participation in his death and resurrection, that triumph over trial, that triumph over tribulation. When I was at church on Sunday at Lindenau, there was the junior football happening. So some of you had restarted your football, but now it's stopped again. So the various ways in which our hearts ache at this time, we turn to Jesus. Last Sunday's Gospel, his heart ached. He was sad when he heard of the news of John the Baptist's death, his murder when he was beheaded. And Jesus went away to a lonely place to pray. He went by boat across the lake, and the people who were desperate to hear him and be healed by him went around the shore of the lake and met him on the other side. And he had compassion for them. He pitied them. He had mercy upon them. He healed them. Then his disciples said to him, "What shall we do? Shall we send them away to villages so they can buy some food?" And Jesus said, "Give them something yourselves." "But we only have 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread." Jesus said, "Bring them to me." He blessed them, got the disciples to share them, and thousands, literally thousands of people were fed in that miracle, in that miraculous event. This is the work of God's grace. This is the work of God's power. in our weakness, in our vulnerability, in our powerlessness. These are the trials through which we triumph by the power of him who loved us. Let him love you. Know him in prayer. Know him in your powerlessness. Let his power reign. And finally, thank you to Ms. Radford and Grade 6R for your beautiful messages of support and appreciation to me personally, with us celebrating, us priests, Father Avinash and Father Francis as well, celebrating the feast of St. John Vianney, our patron, on the 4th of August. So thank you. I'm consoled. Let's continue to pray for each other, pray for our parents, our grandparents, the rest of our family members, particularly those who are directly affected by the pandemic, our teachers, the support staff, everyone in these challenging times, and for all of our parishioners who are sad that the churches are now closed again. And remember, these are the trials through which we triumph by the power of him who loved us.